Thank you. All right, it is officially good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. So today's webinar is going to focus on conducting cost-effective risk assessments for financial services organizations while navigating all of the complex regulatory frameworks that are present in this industry. Financial institutions face increasing compliance demands, and risk assessments are a critical part in meeting these challenges without overextending your organization's resources. Over the next few slides, we're going to break down some key regulatory frameworks, essential components of risk assessments, and go over a couple of practical strategies to remain compliant in a cost-effective manner. Before we get started, we have some introductions.
Thanks, Miguel. My name is Richard Suls, and I've been consulting in cybersecurity for decades. I'm a court-admitted expert witness in the U.S. federal and several state courts. In addition to delivering risk management work, I also perform threat modeling, tabletops, pen testing, and ethical vulnerability research. Last year, I was published and or quoted in articles in U.S. News and World Report, the VMware blog, HelpNet Security, and others, in addition to my public speaking efforts at cons and cybersecurity gatherings. Miguel?
Thanks. I'm Miguel Gutierrez, a cybersecurity professional with about a little over 5 years of cybersecurity experience, focusing primarily on work with financial institutions. My work, for the most part, includes design of security systems and evaluation of these different architectures, as well as helping organizations reach regulatory compliance, so whether that be evaluating existing solutions or developing some that meet our regulators' expectations.
Thanks, Miguel. So financial services operate in one of the most highly regulated industries, where compliance is not just a best practice, it's a fundamental requirement. Regulatory bodies have implemented stringent frameworks in order to ensure the security, resilience, and integrity of financial institutions, particularly in the face of growing cyber threats and operational risks. Some key frameworks that are shaping risk management and compliance in this space include New York DFS, Cybersecurity Regulation Amendment 500. This mandates risk assessments, cybersecurity policies, and incident response plans in order to protect consumer data and financial systems. It applies to financial institutions operating in New York, including banks, insurance companies, and lenders. FedLine regulations. Well, financial institutions that connect to the Federal Reserve payment and transaction systems must adhere to strict security controls to prevent fraud, unauthorized access, and system breaches. These requirements are critical for safeguarding the backbone of the U.S. financial system. The FedRAMP, Federal Risk and Authorization Management Program framework, governs cloud security for organizations that provide services to federal agencies. Financial institutions leveraging cloud technologies must often align with FedRAMP security controls to ensure secure cloud environments and data protection. Each of these frameworks requires organizations to conduct some form of risk assessment, which involves identifying vulnerabilities, assessing threats, and enforcing security controls. However, not all financial institutions need an exhaustive, full-scale ISO 27005 risk assessment. The real challenge is striking a balance between compliance and cost efficiency, ensuring that your risk assessment process is thorough enough to meet regulatory obligations while remaining scalable and practical. For many organizations, this means adopting a risk-based approach, focusing on the most critical assets, the highest priority threats, and the most cost-effective mitigation strategies. The goal is not just to comply with regulations, but to build a resilient security posture that protects both the institution and its customers. As we move forward, we'll break down the essential components of a cost-effective risk assessment and discuss how financial institutions can meet compliance requirements without unnecessary complexity or expenses. Over to you, Miguel.
Thanks, Richard. So we're going to go over the 5 key components of a structured risk assessment. So the 5 key steps are, first off, asset identification. Every risk assessment needs to start off with a strong foundation, and we need to answer the, I think, most impactful question here, which is, what are we looking at? To be more specific, I'll ask, what is the data and where is it? And maybe even, what's the scope of the regulation we want to address, just to hone in our focus a bit more. For a financial institution, these critical assets can be customer data, financial transactions, and the systems that hold or otherwise process the data, anything that touches these critical assets. Up next is our threat analysis, where we take a minute to understand what are the primary targets, primary threats to your organization. Identifying risks like cyber attacks, and more specifically, something like ransomware, other operational disruptions, and even non-compliance penalties from regulators. For our vulnerability assessment, we take stock of the controls that you have in place to protect your assets and evaluate the weaknesses in these security controls that could be exploited. Fourth is the risk calculation, where we take the overlap of these 3 previous steps. So, what assets are we working with? What threats are most likely to target these assets? And lastly, what vulnerabilities do we have in the controls for these assets that increase the likelihood of a threat impacting the organization? So this is where we do the simple math and find the overlap and decide, what are the risks and what are the highest risks? And that leads on to our 5th step, prioritization. So every organization is unique, and there's no one-size-fits-all blanket solution that we can give you to perfectly polish your IT security. However, you can improve your security posture by allocating resources effectively and by focusing on the highest risk areas for your organization. A well-executed risk assessment is going to strengthen your posture by informing the business decisions and by leading your organization down a path that makes the most sense for you. This is something that has effects that are more far-reaching than just meeting a compliance requirement.
Thanks, Miguel. So let's talk about mitigation strategies. Once we've identified risks, the next step is mitigation, ensuring that vulnerabilities are addressed effectively while maintaining regulatory compliance. There are 3 key strategies that every financial institution should implement. Security controls. Strong security controls form the backbone of any risk mitigation strategy. Implementing MFA, or multi-factor authentication, significantly reduces unauthorized access risks, while encryption safeguards sensitive financial data both in transit and at rest. Access controls should follow the principle of least privilege, ensuring that employees have only the access to systems and data necessary for their roles. These measures help prevent breaches, insider threats, and compliance violations. Next, policy and procedure updates. Security isn't just about technology. It's also about processes and people. Policies must align with evolving regulations and industry best practices. This includes updating data privacy policies, refining incident response procedures, and ensuring that employees understand and adhere to security guidelines. A well-structured policy framework ensures that risk mitigation efforts are systematic and enforceable across the entire organization. Third, regular monitoring and auditing. A one-time assessment isn't enough. Cyber threats and regulatory landscapes evolve constantly, so continuous monitoring is critical. Organizations should implement real-time threat detection, conduct regular vulnerability scans, and perform security audits to identify new risks. Routine compliance checks help to ensure that all implemented controls remain effective and align with current regulations. By integrating these strategies into a continuous improvement process, financial institutions can shift from a reactive to a proactive security posture. And this approach not only ensures compliance, but also builds long-term resilience against emerging threats. Risk mitigation isn't just about checking a compliance box. It's about securing operations, protecting customer trust, and strengthening the foundation of your organization. Miguel?
Thanks, Richard. So now, why don't we take a look at a real example? What might a risk assessment look like for a financial services organization? Let's look at some common issues identified for financial services in implementing a cost-effective risk assessment. So in an asset, when we identify the assets, in this first step, we look at key assets, which will be something like customer data. Think of everything you need to collect for KYC, account numbers, SSNs, etc., transaction records, customer lists, and maybe even your company's proprietary financial algorithms. We've identified the what. Now ask where. What IT systems does this information exist in, transit through, is processed by? And in today's day and age, I expect there to be some sort of cloud component. So kind of adds another difficulty to figuring out where your data is. For the threat analysis, we ask what threats does your organization face? Cyber threats such as ransomware, which is especially relevant for financial services, phishing, malicious insider risks. Ask do you know if you're compliant with NYDFS or FedRAMP or any other regulations? And are you willing to take the risk of not being the first to find out? For the vulnerability assessment, we look at weaknesses in your security controls. We'll take customer data, for example. Is it consistently encrypted at rest? Is there anywhere along any of your business processes where this data might not be encrypted? Really try to look for the weak points in any of your processes. Does your organization regularly review user privileges to prevent job creep? If someone switches job descriptions, do they keep all of their previous access? And you know about it? We might find network security, data storage practices, user access controls to really not be up to spec. And those are some of the common issues that we identify. For risk mitigation, some of the most common mitigations we see here are, and this will seem like perennial advice, but implementing multi-factor authentication. We say because it works. Strengthening encryption, so both in transit and at rest, and updating your policies. So including to reflect these other two mitigations that I've just mentioned, MFA and your encryption standards. Because for regulators, and I think just as a general rule of thumb, if it's not written down, it doesn't exist. So you want to make sure that things are written down, signed off on, and enforceable. Makes your job easier as well. And lastly, continuous monitoring. You want to make sure that not only do you implement some technical controls for real-time threat monitoring, but that you perform regular security audits and regular risk assessments to really make any of these findings incremental and more manageable for your organization. So you don't end up with a fire to fix with a month deadline. You want to make sure you catch these things early on.
Thanks, Miguel. Now let's talk about some tailored risk mitigation strategies to ensure compliance while maintaining efficiency. There are three key areas to focus on: security controls, policy updates, and continuous monitoring. You may have heard me mention these already. They're very important, obviously. So first, let's talk about security controls. Implementing a robust security measure or robust security measures is essential. Multi-factor authentication, as we've mentioned, is a critical safeguard, adding an extra layer of protection beyond just passwords. Something you know, something you have. Enhanced encryption protocols help secure sensitive financial data, reducing the risk of breaches. And strengthening access control policies ensures that only authorized individuals can access critical systems, minimizing insider threats. Policy updates are very important. Keeping policies aligned with regulatory requirements and security best practices is not a one-time effort. Organizations must regularly review and update their data privacy policies to reflect evolving regulations. Incident response procedures should be refined to ensure swift action in case of security incidents, reducing downtime and financial impact. As WithSecure's global lead for crisis management exercises and tabletops, I have to remind you to test your IR plans with your teams. It's fine to have your policies on paper, but if you haven't pulled it out, tested it with your group, and then an incident occurs, they're going to be as completely unaware of these policies and procedures as they might be if they didn't exist. Employee training programs are equally important. Staff need ongoing education to recognize threats like phishing and social engineering attacks. Finally, continuous monitoring, because security is not static. Establishing a monitoring program allows organizations to detect and respond to emerging threats in real time. Regular vulnerability scans help identify weaknesses before they can be exploited. And security audits ensure compliance and help organizations stay ahead of regulatory expectations. A proactive approach to monitoring can significantly reduce the likelihood of costly security incidents. It's not a matter of if, but when your organization is attacked. By focusing on these three pillars, strong security controls, up-to-date policies, and continuous monitoring, organizations can effectively mitigate risk while maintaining compliance in a cost-effective manner.
Thanks for that, Richard. Now I'm going to go over a few of the key benefits of a cost-effective risk assessment. So we're going to look at a couple of benefits that are beyond just meeting compliance requirements. Financial institutions have to navigate a really complex regulatory environment while maintaining the operational efficiency they need and safeguarding customer trust. So first off, we'll start with the most obvious one, which is just improved compliance. Regulatory bodies such as NYDFS, FedRAMP, impose strict requirements on financial services to manage their risks effectively. A thorough risk assessment is going to ensure compliance with these regulations, reduce the likelihood of costly penalties, legal repercussions, and reputational damage. So identifying these gaps before auditors do, the organization can proactively address these compliance issues and demonstrate due diligence. Secondly, is your enhanced security posture. In today's rapidly evolving threat landscape, cyber attacks, breaches, operational disruptions pose a serious risk to your organization. And a risk assessment is going to allow you to identify vulnerabilities, implement the necessary safeguards, and develop a proactive defense strategy. Address the security gaps early and reduce the likelihood of a successful cyber attack. Thirdly is reduced costs. Prioritized findings from an assessment are going to let your organization prioritize its investments, its security investments effectively. Instead of applying a blanket measure that may be costly or unnecessary, you can focus your resources, time and money, onto the highest risk areas. This targeted approach is going to prevent overspending on redundant security controls while ensuring critical vulnerabilities are addressed, leading to a more cost-efficient risk strategy. I know I've seen it many times. Vendor promises a product that's going to solve XYZ problem. You may already have the tools, just not configured properly. So save the money there. Then we have improved customer trust. So data security and privacy are paramount in the financial services sector. You're handling people's money, and people tend to be a little sensitive about that. They expect their sensitive information to be protected, and any breach can quickly erode trust. I know it's been over half a decade and we're still talking about Equifax. It's not something that customers tend to forget. So by conducting these regular risk assessments and implementing strong security measures, you can signal your commitment to safeguarding customer data. And this not only enhances your customers' confidence, but also strengthens your relationship with investors, business partners, and regulators. If we take all these benefits into account, we end up with an organization that allows the leadership team to make informed decisions about its security investments and develop a strategic plan for the future to build a proactive rather than reactive cybersecurity program. And this is going to give your organization, broadly speaking, a more competitive advantage. With regulatory scrutiny intensifying, you're going to need to demonstrate a strong security posture, and this can make show up as a key differentiator in the market. Clients prefer to work with organizations that have a good reputation for compliance and security and not showing up in the news. Making effective risk assessments is a key part of this and a key part of your business's success. So by focusing on the critical risks and making sure that these risk assessments are cost effective, your organization can find an optimal balance between security, compliance, and operational efficiency. So a well-structured risk assessment process doesn't just reduce the vulnerabilities, but it's going to enhance your long-term resilience, reduce costs overall, and foster trust with customers.
Thanks, Miguel. So as we wrap up, let's reflect on the key points from today's discussion. Risk assessments are not just a regulatory requirement. They're a strategic tool that helps financial services companies strengthen security, improve compliance, and allocate resources efficiently. By systematically identifying, analyzing, and mitigating risks, organizations can proactively address vulnerabilities before they lead to costly incidents. Spending money to be prepared for an incident is almost always more cost-effective than recovering from one. A cost-effective approach ensures that compliance efforts are both sustainable and practical, balancing security with financial constraints. So what are the next steps? First, take a closer look at your current risk assessment processes. Are they aligned with your regulatory obligations? Are they focused on the most critical threats? Next, consider refining your approach by leveraging automation, streamlining reporting, and integrating security into daily operations. Most importantly, risk management is not a one-time effort. It is a continuous process. By embedding security and compliance into your company's culture, you not only protect your business, but also build long-term trust with regulators, stakeholders, and customers. Thank you for your time today. We have several questions that have already been placed in the comment box, and I would just like to remind you that if you have any questions, you can use this questions comment box to add your own in. So now I think we'll take some of the questions. The first one being, Miguel, perhaps you want to take this. How do you see evolving regulations like New York DFS or FedRAMP impacting financial institutions over the next few years?
Sure. So like I've mentioned in the presentation, the cybersecurity, the threat landscape is continually evolving, and regulators take note of this and update their regulations accordingly. What we can expect along with these updates is stricter enforcement of risk assessments, more emphasis on real-time threat monitoring, and increased scrutiny of third-party vendors. So I guess the focus doesn't just sit at, isn't enclosed within the bounds of your organization, but also any vendors that you do business with or utilize the services of. Financial institutions are going to need to stay agile and continuously update your own strategies to remain compliant while balancing operational efficiency. So it's a tough thing to juggle.
Thanks, Miguel. We've got another one here, a good one. What are some of the biggest challenges organizations face when trying to balance compliance with cost-effective risk management? And I'll take this one if you don't mind. One major challenge is determining the right level of security investment, right? We've been talking about efficiency and effectiveness, financial constraints. Most organizations struggle with implementing robust risk management without overspending on unnecessary controls. Another challenge is the complexity of overlapping regulations, which I'm sure all of you who are in attendance can attest to. It can create compliance fatigue. The key is to prioritize critical risks, leverage automation where possible, and integrate compliance into existing processes rather than treating it as a burden and a separate responsibility. I see another question. So, Miguel, perhaps you want to take this one.
Sure.
How do you prioritize? Oh, no, I'm sorry, there was one ahead of time there. How can automation and AI improve the efficiency of risk assessments in financial institutions?
Oh, sure. So automation and AI, I'll bundle the two as just automation. Um, it can really improve the efficiency of your risk assessment process and some of your controls by helping your team continuously monitor systems for vulnerabilities in real time. You can do some automated compliance reporting to reduce some human error and save time. Um, One tool that I've seen in action is using machine learning to detect patterns in fraudulent activities or cybersecurity threats. You'll see this as anomaly detection, which is I think pretty popular in a couple of like SIEM solutions that I've seen. Um, Prioritizing risks dynamically based on evolving threat intelligence, and this kind of plays along with detecting anomalous activity. A lot of these will reset baselines based off of sort of global data sets. Um, And by integrating these different AI security analytics, you can move from reactive to proactive since you have essentially machine scanning and taking all of these three threat intel feeds and building something that's a little more relevant to your organization.
Thanks, Miguel. And I think that you might notice as we go through this, we're really emphasizing moving from a reactive to a proactive state. And you might remember if you've been on other webinars with us, particularly the New York DFS ones, that we're seeing regulators trying to push the marketplace towards that proactive state, both with fines and frameworks. And I think that what we're going to see over the next couple of years is that push towards proactivity being more of a commonality and something that we're going to see embraced by most companies, especially the ones that are most successful at security. We have a couple other great questions. So how do financial institutions ensure that third-party vendors also comply with necessary security regulations? Fantastic question. So to start, organizations should implement third-party risk management, which are TPRM programs. That can include vendor security assessments before onboarding any third-party service providers. If they're already onboarded, you may request from them on a regular basis some kind of assessment that they've already had done. Others are contractual security clauses requiring vendors to adhere to regulatory standards such as DFS or FedRAMP. We've also seen ongoing audits and monitoring to ensure vendors maintain compliance. And again, this kind of goes into this concept of security is a continuous process. Other things that we've seen are clear incident response protocols in the event of a security breach that does involve a vendor. And that's very important to make sure that you've got that in writing. By integrating these vendor security opportunities into your overall risk assessment strategy, a financial institution can minimize supply chain vulnerabilities, which I think is a hot topic for this year. Let's see, other questions.
Let's see one here that I can take. So
Sure.
how do you prioritize which risks to mitigate first when resources are limited? This one is kind of the crux of our argument here, right? So what you'll do is you'll prioritize risks based on a combination of likelihood and impact. So any risks that could lead to a regulatory noncompliance, financial loss, reputational damage should be addressed first. These are the ones with the biggest impact, right? And so one tool that we like to use quite frequently is developing a risk matrix to categorize each of these threats, focusing on high impact and high likelihood risks, which will be your highest priority. and you can monitor and set lower on the priority lists. Sorry, so lower on the priority list, any risks that are maybe low likelihood or low impact. So you can develop a cost-benefit analysis based off of this matrix to help decide which mitigation strategies are going to provide your organization with the best return on investment.
Fantastic. Thank you, Miguel. One more question that's in here. Feel free to add more again through the comment questions box. But are there specific cybersecurity threats or fraud risks that are increasing in financial services today? I think that we and everyone in attendance knows that, yes, of course, financial services are facing rising threats, including ransomware attacks, which we know have been a problem for a very long time within the financial realm. Business email compromise scams that manipulate employees into authorizing fraudulent transactions. Synthetic identity fraud, where criminals create fake identities to open fraudulent accounts. Of course, we're seeing deep fakes starting to become a real problem, but not only in the financial industry, but in general. And I've had many clients, especially within the last 6 months, come to me asking me if I've seen these deepfake videos or I've been privy to them, and because mainly that they have experienced them and come very close to the edge of actually falling for them. So that's something to be very aware of, because it will become more and more ubiquitous as time goes on. And lastly, API security threats. I mean, these are very common. Financial institutions are increasingly relying on open banking, third-party integrations, and you have to test your APIs. Ultimately, that's any kind of external exposure is obviously a risk and the potential for someone to take advantage of that. So staying ahead of these threats requires a combination of advanced security measures, employee training, and continuous risk monitoring, something you may have heard us mention a few times. Last question. With financial services increasingly moving to the cloud, what additional risk considerations should organizations be aware of? Would you like to take this, Miguel, or shall I?
See, I can go ahead and take this one. So I'll go over some of the top, in my opinion at least, additional risk considerations that organizations should take. So first off, and I think maybe one of the more obvious risks here is data sovereignty issues. So you want to make sure that your data is stored in compliance with jurisdictional laws. I think one of the most obvious regulations, at least one that was huge a while ago, was GDPR. Next, we'll look at misconfigured security settings. So honestly, one of the leading cause of breaches that we see up in the cloud. A shared responsibility model and any misunderstandings there. You should be aware of what parts of this service are under the management of the vendor or cloud provider and which ones your organization is responsible for managing. Any miscommunications there can lead to some misconfigurations or gaps in security that can leave customer data open to attack. And lastly is third-party dependencies here. So cloud providers and any SaaS applications that you might be using need to be continuously monitored for vulnerabilities. So think of just any applications that you might use or that aren't developed in-house or that are hosted elsewhere. This kind of vulnerability monitoring can be a bit more difficult, but it's still a necessary process. In general, there are several cloud security best practices that we recommend for financial institutions. Just generally strong identity management, making sure that encrypted standards are up to spec, and performing your due diligence on these vendors.
Very nice. Well, let's see. I think that we've answered all of our questions. So thank you for your attendance and attention today. This is one of many webinars that we've held through advisory and security and risk management at WithSecure. Please check our YouTube channel for others, and Always be on the lookout for additional signups. We tend to give these quarterly or so. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us at the WithSecure Consulting website, through LinkedIn, random emails, or phone calls. Yeah, we're around. Again, thank you for your time and your attention, and hope that this provided you some relevant and interesting things to think about. Have a great day. We'll see you soon.
Thanks, everyone.